And now, if you will remain standing as you are able and join your voices with Alejandra and the praise band.
Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord. And thus around the throne, and thus around the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. The hill of Zion yields 1,000 sacred sweets before we reach the heavenly field, before we reach the heavenly field, or walk the golden streets, or walk the golden streets. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Oh, 'cause greater things have yet to be done. Greater things are left to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to be done. Greater things are left to be done here. Then let our songs abound, and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground to fairer worlds on high, to fairer worlds on high. 'Cause we're marching to Zion. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Oh, 'cause greater things have yet to be done. Greater things have yet to be done. Greater things are left to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to be done. Greater things are left to be done here. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God.
Please be seated. Very nice. I may have told you before, that song is widely acclaimed as the greatest Christian song ever written. Widely acclaimed by me. You wake up a little sleepy this morning? Yeah, it's a change in barometric pressure, I think. I long for the time change. I almost never say that, but it'll be nice soon. So today we're going to talk about a basic human desire or path. Most of us want to get out of where we came from and go and explore and see the big wide world, make our impact, and, well, you can fill in the blanks. This is a story about that in miniature and symbolically. My older brother Dennis fulfilled a long-time dream last week. He's been talking about this for, the last 20, 25 years. His idea has always been that when he retired, he would buy a motorhome, deluxe, huge type of motorhome, and then he and his wife would go and see America since they weren't tied to Casper or to work anymore, and doggone if he didn't do it. I was so very, very happy for him. Dennis came out of the same circumstances I did, and he worked really hard all of his life, so he deserves to be able to cash in his dream and to begin the adventure. The adventure doesn't actually begin until December 31st, which is the date he retires, but they wanted the motorhome first to get used to it. So they ordered it in North Carolina, flew out there together, and decided to drive it back to kind of get in touch with the difference between motorhoming and driving a regular vehicle. Apparently, there's quite a large difference. I've never driven one of the behemoths, but it's pretty different. His is the size of like a Greyhound bus, so it's a massive thing. Here's the story. They flew to North Carolina, all Twitter, and happy to begin the first part of the process of living out their dreams. And on the first day, they had reservations about 6.5, 7 hours down the road, which was great. In about hour 2, they discovered that the toilets in the motorhome didn't flush. They found that out the hard way. But relatively short trip there, so they called ahead, and they were supposed to have someone there from a motorhome dealer that could look at the toilets, and they had reservations to park the rig. They got there, and somebody had the idea that they needed bacon for breakfast the next morning, and there was a little store, so his wife jumped out to go and get that, and Dennis remembered something he had forgotten to tell her, so he jumped out to go and tell her, and when he did that, he took a couple steps and realized, I just locked the motorhome with the keys in the ignition and the engine running. And so they got to wait a few extra hours as they call a locksmith. Here's something if you don't know, if you have the idea that you'd like to buy a motorhome, it is much more expensive for a locksmith to come and undo a motorhome than it is a little pickup truck or other things. But they have a really good marriage, thank God for that, and they made it through this first time. They got the rig unlocked first before the mechanic for the toilet showed up, and Dennis had an insight. He remembered that a lot of times when you don't know what to do with an electronic thing, and toilets are electronic in a motorhome, you just turn them off, wait, and turn them back on. He did that, and he fixed it. So there's a kind of a failure, a couple failures, and a success. They got on the road the next day, not too much. They drove through Kansas City, and if you're from Wyoming, really, if that's your primary driving place, it's scary in any vehicle to be surrounded by cars, right? When I first went to Colorado, I felt literally like every time I went out, I was under attack, like people were doing it on purpose, crowding me and being next to me. And so I empathized with Dennis. To drive that big rig on the freeway through Kansas City had to be really interesting. They stopped for the night, and the next day they got up. They're going to go north towards Interstate 80, and the little navigation aid said you could save 12 minutes if you take an alternate route. Would you like to? Does anybody know the proper answer to that question? No, I would not, because I'm perfectly... No, they decided 12 minutes, time's a wasting, so they took the suggested route, which ended up being a little country road, two lanes that semis used, maybe to avoid scales, or who knows, right? So Dennis is driving a bus, which he's got no experience at, and hanging on for dear life. There's a drop-off on his right, and he doesn't know what's on his left. He doesn't want to find out. And the semis are coming so close, right, that you can kind of feel them pass. And sure enough, one of them doing this motion, and who knows what Dennis was doing, somehow, as the the semi passed, it clipped the motorhome and it tore up the rear quarter panel and knocked off his taillight for him. For the record, they did not, in fact, save 12 minutes. But they did immediately head for the highway as fast as they possibly could. They made it safe and sound into the place that they had reservations, and they settled in for the night. They reported, this is all from Facebook News, they reported a day later that they were going to spend a second night in Nebraska, and then they had a long trip home to Casper. Raise your hand if you've ever driven across Nebraska. How many birthdays did you celebrate before you got to the right? It takes forever to get there. Anyway, they were facing about 8 to 10 hours in the big rig when they went to bed that night. And when they went to bed that night, a miracle occurred before morning. And I will talk to you about the miracle after I talk to you about some other stuff. Jacob's dream. So we are in Genesis 28, 10 through 22, and this is a miracle of sorts also. Remember the background, Jacob is in trouble with his brother because he stole the inheritance from him, in league with his mom, and now he's running to his mom's family, which is to say to a bunch of criminals, and on the way he stops to have a rest, and this happens to Jacob. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place, and he stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep, and he dreamed. And behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. That's my God voice. Okay. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. Your offering shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid. Everybody is in Scripture when God confronts them. And he said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Scholars disagree back and forth, but the majority of them think that he is at the place where the cornerstone of the temple will eventually be. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, and he set it up for a pillar, and he poured oil on top of it. He called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a tenth to you. May the Lord add blessing to the reading of Scripture. So again, Jacob is running away from troubles that Jacob and his mom have caused. His brother has threatened his life. His father lay relatively close to death, and Jacob cannot go home because home is no longer a place of peace. All his doing. His brother, with the death threat, was done wrong while he was out honoring the old man, and Jacob has no choice now but to run. Again, on some level, it's a story we all understand, whether you ran away when it was time for you to move from home or whether you were gently launched from the nest. Most of us leave and go out into the world at some point. Jacob is hustling out of the world he grew up into, and he is now headed out because he's in a hurry to get away from his brother and the consequences of his action. So if you type into your search engine, what is the meaning of Jacob's ladder? It's hilarious. you're going to come up with as many opinions on what the angels going up and the angels going down as you can find. The beautiful thing about Bible study sometimes, when that many experts disagree, you get to be right no matter what you think. So I don't know what they taught you when you were a little kid, but it means whatever you think it means. I'm going to go with what I think it means, but I want to be clear, right? I'm in the company of some pretty fine scholars, but there are some pretty fine scholars who would say, no, I see the angels coming up and coming down as a symbolic representation of what God promises Jacob. God says to Jacob, I will be with you and you're going out and you're coming in. I'll be with you until all of my promises have come true, right? I am constantly here. So I see the angels up and down as a symbolic representation of the presence of God, constantly renewing itself and incessantly being there for Jacob in the particular case, but for us all in the general case. So the symbolism of up and down of the angels, again, can mean a lot of things, but for me, it is just a symbolic representation of the promise of God. It backs up what God tells Jacob in the dream. So the promise is, look, I am always going to be doing these things that I promised to Jacob and to Isaac, or Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. Note about what God says, it isn't conditional. God doesn't say, if you will do what I tell you to do, if you will ask my opinion before you make any decisions, if you will go around and honor me in these ways, then I will be with you. That would be a very human thing. God doesn't do that. God says to Jacob, who is a liar and a thief and a scoundrel, he says to Jacob, here's the deal. This is what I'm doing, right? I'm going to be with you the whole journey, one way or the other, and I'm going to bring this blessing to pass in time for the whole world through your people. And it's non-transactional. Jacob's reaction to it is absolutely transactional. Jacob is who Jacob is, and it's important for us to know that. God's promise will take place regardless of whether Jacob is a good player or a bad player in it. The things that God has said God will do, and they are not dependent upon us in any way, shape, or form. For you and I, there are a set of promises that fall under the same category. That would be, God has said, He will know the state of your heart and the record of your life, and He will have an accounting. You can't talk your way out of that. There will be an accounting for all souls. That's something that God says is going to happen, period. God says also that in His time, He will bring the matters that we wrestle with in our lives to a close in a cataclysmic way, and at the end of that cataclysm, massive warfare on scales never seen before, etc., He will usher in the world that He intended or that He created and we fouled up in the first place, beginning with the New Jerusalem. When He pronounces those things, God is never saying, look, if only you'll work with me, I'll do these things. They are just going to be. One of the phrases that I'm surprised to be thinking in my 60s, I never would have thought about when I was younger, but it does occur to me after observation. Sometimes I will know a person who is deeply enmeshed in darkness, who is harming other people, who has or appears to have very little conscience. And I think to myself, you've got to go meet Jesus. Do you not understand what that means? Right? You can buy or talk your way out of stuff here. You can make up excuses for how you are and the things you do to other people. You play all of us like fools. But at some point, all of us stand in the center of truth, and we don't get to justify or explain it away. The truth investigates us. There is a difference, of course, in theology when we say these things, right? We are more in line with a Calvinist mindset, but you'll know I only put a toe in that water. What God says God will do, God will do. We are well served to remember. That includes He's going to reveal to us and to whoever else, right, all that we are and all that we have done at some point. We're going to want to have Jesus with us, in my opinion, but you might be doing so well that you won't need Him. You might have convinced everybody around you and your own self that you're so spectacular you don't need Jesus to defend you or to save you or anything else. You'll stand the test. Good luck to you. We're all going to go see Jesus, and it's going to be one life-changing experience. Jacob hears the promise of God. I said it to Abraham, I said it to your father, I'm saying it to you, right? Through the people that I'm forming out of your tribe, I am going to do great things for the whole of the world. And Jacob reacts by saying to himself, well, what conditions would I like to put on the promise that God just made? Let me read to you a section of that scripture again. This is Jacob's response to God's pronouncement. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if. Let's just ponder that for a second. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, meaning he gets to escape the trouble that he's in, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, specifically fine clothing made out of silk, so that I can come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Can you imagine the rejoicing that broke out in heaven when Jacob the thief said, you know what, I'm willing to deal with you, Lord. Here's what I need. I need shelter and safety and food and nice clothing, and I need you to do whatever you have to do to clear the way for me to go back home. If you do that, here's the deal. I'm going to give you back a tenth of everything you give me. If you don't mind signing right here, that'd be swell. The angels rejoiced and all of heaven rolled and thunder clapped. Yeah. Or worse, didn't laugh. Jacob responds to God as if he is talking to his own earthly father, or as if he is huddled again with his mother and tried to figure out how do we take advantage of the situation. He's fine with the whole, wow, I was in the presence of God and my heart skipped a beat or whatever, but Jacob is who Jacob is, and he's going to make a deal. He wants what he wants, and if God gives that to him, then God gets the pleasure of saying that Jacob is one of his. Man alive. Are you aware of the gospel of prosperity? Are you? It's the largest form of Christianity practiced in the western part of the world right now, and it is Jacob's Christianity. The gospel of prosperity says, here's the deal. If you do the things that we tell you to do, you go to church and you read your Bible and you say your prayers, and you at least act the part really fine on a Sunday morning, then God's going to give you more money than anybody else, more belongings, more land, more everything, because God is transactional and he needs you to play your part. And people line up for miles to get into a church that makes that promise, right? All you have to do is these things, and if you do them and if you say them, then God will give you whatever you want, without ever once mentioning that what God has stated clearly that he wants is for your heart to change towards other people, so that your greatest desire is not having more than them incessantly or being proven better than them somehow, as if that's the scale that we're judged on. What God actually desires for you is not land and money and reputation and statues and a big name in the community. What God desires from each one of us is that our hearts should be so changed that we not only love the people we have been competing against, but we love the people that we don't even like. The gospel of prosperity is Jacob's gospel, believing that if they just look the part for God and everybody agrees to the shallowness of the thought, that they'll get what they want, not knowing that they don't have good sense enough to know what they should want. It's been around for as long as people have worshiped the living God. Jacob is moved by his presence, but not so moved that he breaks his old habits. Jacob is, in a word, a narcissist. He confronts the living God and comes out of it thinking, oh my God, if I play my cards right, I can get a win in this situation. Jacob is all about Jacob. Jacob wakes up in the morning and goes to bed at night having thought only about how his life was in these terms. Did I get what I want, and did I get away with the method that I used to get it? Jacob is a narcissist. You hear that term a lot, right? We're all narcissistic, but to be a genuine, bona fide narcissist, you have to be a hard individual who cares nothing about other people, only about yourself, your goals, and your desires. And that is Jacob. Let me give you a second word for Jacob. Jacob is lost. He has decided to take a detour from the truth and from righteous ways of living and see if he can't get where he wants to go faster. And he is about to find out in the weeks to come how hard the road that he has chosen to save time actually is. Jacob is a narcissist, and all narcissists are lost because they worship themselves and their own fervent dreams and hopes rather than worshiping God and being transformed by him. It's really worth our time to go slow when we're talking about Jacob and to pay attention to him, because we all fall into that trap. In my life, I have been like Jacob over and over and over again, depending on how desperately I wanted what I was praying for. When my wife had cancer and the news was horrible, I was like Jacob in that I promised God I would do anything he would tell me to do if only he would give me what I wanted, which was for her to live through the cancer. When I came here to this church in all of the disarray that it was in, I prayed all of the time that God would increase the church, that we'd find a way to grow, that I would do anything that God asked if we could just kind of set the ship right, not having any idea that setting the ship right would mean to continue to lose for a while until we were at a place where we could get healthy. I do turn into Jacob, or the Jacob in me comes out depending on the severity of the push and how alone and vulnerable I feel. And most of you, I think, do too. It doesn't make us the equal of Jacob as far as the callousness of our hearts, but it does reveal that the propensity of human beings is to get the actual relationship confused and backwards. God does not do deals. He just doesn't. He wants us to live a certain way because our hearts are changed, but he is not willing to do what we desire in order to cause that to happen. If that were so, Christians would be obvious everywhere because all of their dreams would always come true and they would always be blessed because they'd be doing what they promised God that they would do and getting what they desire. That's a broken model of faith, and it's beginning to tell on American Christianity especially. The idea that somehow we can force God's hand into a blessing by just believing the right thing or saying the right thing or whatever it is that people conjure up is an affront to the authority and the truth of who God is. God is the creator of our lives. He's the creator of history and of all things, and he doesn't need our bargaining chips. That's driven home by the experience of Jacob. It's laughable to think that Jacob responds to a visitation from the holy by saying, okay, here are my conditions, right? It's laughable as long as I'm talking about Jacob. It's less humorous when I'm talking about myself, but I do recognize it happens to all of us. The only proper response to a visitation by the holy, right, to those few moments in most people's lives when you really do feel the sacredness around you, the only response is gratitude, period. So Jacob is a narcissist. He's all about Jacob, and he's willing to do anything, including steal from his own flesh and blood in league with his mom in order to gain what he desires, never once guessing that the whole of life and its experience is determined by bringing his will and what he desires into line with God's. He's out in the middle of nowhere, and he's lost, and he's a little bit afraid, but he's still Jacob trying to make deals and bargain with God. In his little bargain with God, Jacob has the seed of hope, just a speck of hope that he might come around at some point and let God be God and quit trying to treat God like a business partner. Let me read that part of the scripture again. He says, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and here is the part, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. So many of us are what you would politely call mature. No, just me? Okay. Most of us have lived at least the first half, if not more, of our lives as we gather today. Not all of us, but most of us. And that means that all of us in that situation spend more time thinking, I wonder what it's actually like. I wonder when my time comes if I'll be prepared. Will I be peaceful? Will I not be? There's some trepidation and fear. There's also, depending on your physical condition, days when most people say, my God, I can't wait, right? I can't wait to go home and be with God and be able to slough off the flesh that pains me so often and causes me to feel the way that I feel. That question begins to press in on us. And really, when that happens, I believe it's good for us because it's the question that we should be asking all of our lives. Are you ready to go home? Do you desire to go home? Are you able in your own heart to say, if it ends tomorrow or even later today, I am in a place where my greatest desire is to be in the presence of the one who created me, and I'm at peace with that. I have had an experience, and several other people in our church have also, of having hearts stop and physically going through the process of death. Some people have reported what I experienced, which was great peace, which is a boon to me every day of my life to remember. And some people had other experiences that weren't nearly as pleasant. But the question begins to loom. Home is coming at us each and every day that we live. And do we desire, are we ready, are we prepared to go home in the way that we should? Knowing that when you get there and that judgment day happens, a little insider tip, you're not going to be asked for your credentials. No one cares if you were a big shot. If you were better than everybody else at what you did so that you were the acclaimed master of the universe in your particular skill set, it's not going to come up. If you spent your life defeating everybody in everything you ever did, games, sports, business, whatever it is, right, so that everybody else is afraid of you, you better hope it doesn't come up. All the things that we value and the things when we set out on our journey that we think will make our lives what we want them to be, they're not a part of the mix except for in the negative. Other questions are going to be asked. How were you toward other people? How did you see and treat your enemies? Did you take care of your family before you took care of yourself? Did you value peace and the propagation of faith and the joy of release for forgiveness of sins with other people? They're going to be asking some questions that will make many people very uncomfortable. They will not be judging us on the standards that we have set, because the standards that human beings set are that we need to prove we're better than one another, and the standard of God is, no, you're not. I made each and every one of you. It's a different thing. And we should spend some time considering the matter. What excuse do you have? What reason do you have for the way you've lived? I've got a million of them. I keep trying them in prayer, and God keeps throwing them back at me. So if you need one or two, just call me. They're for sale for $100 a piece. Really, we got to get our minds in our faith tradition wrapped around. This thing does not continue to go the way we want it to go. In fact, it really, in truth, never has. We've just fooled ourselves so that even things that we achieve, we then look backwards and say, well, God has blessed me. Thank God for that. But most people, when they say that, are still talking transactionally. They're thinking to themselves, that's because I go to church, or that's because I read my Bible, or that's because technically, I've proven I'm better than everybody else, so God blesses me because I'm so good. It's a different equation. I hate it when I get like this. On the other hand, I could be wrong. It could be that you get up there and there's a champions dinner, and if you've been better than everybody else in the world, then you get a special place at the table. That might happen too. Take your chances. Pays your money, takes your chances. Jacob is worried about stuff that is easy for God anyway, about food and money and clothing and getting his way and being able to go back home and really inherit the land that he stole from his brother. He's worried about all kinds of stuff that just don't make any sense in an eternal perspective. He's worried about those things instead of having the wherewithal to worry about, what do you suppose God thinks of somebody that rips off their brother like that? What do you suppose God thinks in his heart when he sees Jacob and his mom conspiring to harm the old man and the brother in irreparable ways. And then Jacob says to God, I got a deal for you. At least Jacob has the good sense to include in his deal that he'd like to go home in peace. I think what he probably means by that is brother dies or brother moves off or God performs a miracle or whatever, and he gets to go home and inherit the stolen goods, and nobody's going to bother him about it. I think that's what he probably means, but at least he said the right words. So Mona and Dennis were somewhere around 8 to 10 hours, depending on how many detours they were going to take from Casper, out there in the middle of the corn in Nebraska. I wrote a song about Nebraska. I'll sing it for you real quickly, just as a bonus for today. Are you ready? It's called the Corn Song. Corn, corn, everywhere there's corn, planted in the evening water every morning. Now, corn, corn, everywhere there's corn. What in the world did they do with that much corn? It's an original composition. Please do not distribute it or copy it. So they woke up somewhere in the corn, right? And home was a hard day's travel away. And here's the miracle. Dennis got up that day, you can imagine, fried. It's like riding a motorcycle. If you've never done it before, it's a lot scarier than it looks from the outside. And his new baby had damage to the quarter panel, right? And they were just hoping the toilets held out. And Dennis said, I don't think we need to make the whole long drive to Casper. How about we drive 4 hours and then we park the rig and have a picnic and go walking in the corn and just relax a little bit, and then we'll have an easy ride home, because when I get home, I would like to be at peace. What a different traveling mindset that is, huh? Instead of let's just take our lives in our own hands in a vehicle we don't know anything about and push hard on the freeway of life to get home so we get away from all the big adventures. Nope. He showed just beautiful, great, deep wisdom. For Dennis, the final push was less about, my gosh, we bought a big motorhome and our dreams are coming true, and more about, well, I would like to have an easy day and then enjoy my wife's company and then rest and in good company with my wife go home where we can have peace. His desire all of his adult life has been to have a motorhome, to get out of Casper and go see the whole wide world. When he did, he discovered some things, right? The whole wide world is still a rough and tumble place. And Casper's not so bad, depending on how it's been when you were away from it. Here's the lesson for all of us. When we look at Jacob, and we see that even in his narcissism and his confusion and his egocentrism, all he wants is to tell God what to give him. He has a good sense, too, to long to be home and at peace. Those are deep, universal truths. As our lives move on, and what we might be begins to fade, as whatever the efforts of our youth have been slowly begin the process of turning to dust, most people, whether they're people of faith or whether they're not, begin to say to themselves, what I want when this part of the journey ends somehow is to have peace, to have a peace that I've never really enjoyed on my travels. As Christians, it's our great privilege to be able to have a lot of that peace while we're traveling. But we have to get the fundamentals right. This life is not about making a deal with God where you'll do a nice thing for him if he just gives you the petty desires of your heart. It is about giving your heart to God so that he can mold and shape it, so that in the circumstance that you live right now, you discover you can have the peace that you long for eternally, or at least a big old slice of it, enough to get you through without having to change anything except for your own heart and the way you see other people. The essence of God has been that he created this world for a purpose that we haven't really clearly discerned, and he has said that at some point his actions will cause the world to turn round right and become the world that he desired. And in the meantime, those who are paying attention to him and who depend on him to guide their journey have the privilege of enjoying the peace that he is promising as they journey. In the illustration of today, I find more and more that God is calling me to take a little break now and then from the hyper competition and from thinking that the stuff I desire will somehow have power that it doesn't. Look around and say to myself, my God, aren't I blessed to be on the road with the people that I am on the road with, friends and others also, and I am, and so are you. The quality of our life in the flesh is almost totally dependent upon our reaction to what God has said clearly. I hope that in our church, through our ministries, through the preaching, through the way we conduct ourselves, and the mindset we have about what it means to be a disciple, that you're hearing that message and absorbing it. Everything that we do, as far as we possibly can, is about trying to make a good place in the community of Visalia and Tulare County. Everything we do internally is about this idea of, if you will give up your anger and your enemies and the way the world has taught you to be, if you'll give it over to God and know how to get rid of it, God will replace those things in your heart with peace coming from your desire to serve the people around you. That's our theory, our idea of ministry, that our hearts and our minds get changed by doing the right things and by asking God only this: lead us in faithful ways until we attain the peace that you have promised. We do everything that we possibly can to make that available to anyone who desires it. If you're a little worn out by the journey, if you're thinking, my God, I cannot take another bypass, right? I cannot go down that road again. I don't know what I'm going to do. I promise you, everything you need for peace is offered in and through the ministries of our church. You just need to choose to serve God in those ways, to brush away the debris, to understand that the whole point of the journey has not been to get away from where we came, but to get back to where we were made. And the best way to do that is in the will of God. It's a privilege to be on this big old bus with you all, and I hope it's a good trip the rest of the way. God bless.